Good evening, Canada. May we have your votes, please? Eurovision is getting a new member. For 7 decades, Europe's wildly popular song contest has mixed pop music, kitsch, glitter, and national pride. And while Eurovision may be European by name, countries including Australia and Israel have found a place on its stage. And now Canada is set to join them from next year, a move championed by Prime Minister Mark Carney. Now, that may sound like a strange political priority. Take a look at these images from the latest contest in May to give you a taste if you're not quite familiar with it. Although it's billed as a strictly cultural event, Eurovision has always been political. So why is Canada taking part? Is it a bit of fun or part of a concerted effort to bring Canada closer to Europe at a difficult time with Washington? And why does it want to be part of this right now, considering that several countries boycotted Eurovision this year in protest over Israel's participation? Anis Heydari is senior reporter at CBC News in Calgary, and it's a happy Canada Day to you, Anis. I'm not going to make you sing "Oh Canada," but just tell us, should we read into anything into the symbolism of Canada getting at least culturally closer to Europe on its own national holiday?
I think part of why the announcement was made today was not everyone, clearly I'm not off work today, but there's big celebrations of arts and culture really across Canada on Canada Day. It's a good opportunity for whether it's, the CBC, Radio Canada, my employer, or the federal government to be able to highlight an arts and culture really festival and opportunity that they want Canadians to be able to participate in. I don't know that Canadians would take it as drifting away from Canadian identity on Canada Day and more just an opportunity to be maybe a little patriotic and say, hey, we're going to try and show ourselves off to Europe and the Eurovision family. And we're going to use Canada Day as the jumping off point to say we're pretty great, or at least that's the theory.
And has that been resonating with Canadians? I'm just wondering how familiar they are with the contest and I guess how they've been reacting to this news.
When I say it's a mixed bag, I don't mean that people have had negative reactions, but you've got Eurovision fans in Canada, people who know this festival, who know the content, and they are very excited. My phone has been blowing up all day since the news was released by CBC first thing this morning. But I would say there's a substantial part of the population that doesn't know what it is and are going, oh, well, what is that? And that'll probably continue for quite a while, because of the time differences. When the Eurovision final, that the big show airs, it's the middle of the day, usually on a weekend. It's not primetime television now here in Canada. Yeah. So many people know about it only through the craziest songs or the really spectacularly cheesy performances, and they hear about it in that sort of, and finally, this wacky thing happened in Europe, footnote to a newscast. So there's a lot of people who are very excited, and then there's a lot of people who are going, oh, what is that? And I think those are going to be the people that we are hearing more from in the coming weeks and months, because we'll need to ramp up our own version of the contest to figure out who's going to represent Canada when they go to the semifinals. And that'll probably be when we see more Canadians pay attention. At least I assume so.
Okay, fair enough. Let's talk some stereotypes here. Now, Canadians are known for, being very lovely, polite, down-to-earth people. Eurovision is very camp and extravagant. I'm just wondering, does that style fit into Canada's cultural personality, or are they going to learn or have to learn how to do Eurovision?
I certainly think Canadians are going to have to try and figure out a way to put our own twist on Eurovision, but heaven forgive me, it's not like we're free of our own over-the-top campy performances here. I mean, a Eurovision winner herself, Celine Dion, is from Canada, and she is very, very much a Quebecer in her attitude and her ethos and her performance style. So it's not so much that Canadians are going to be, maybe down to earth and demure. Far from it. The style of performances might be a little bit different. I mean, I'm here in Calgary, and in Calgary, Alberta, we have the Calgary Stampede, a giant rodeo coming up. It's called the greatest outdoor show on earth for a reason. It's got huge music festivals, huge performance stages, a lot of cheesy and campy performances there. So they might be different from what you see, from the European mainland, but I think Canadians will be able to step up their game when it comes to an over-the-top performance. We certainly do them in our own way every year here in Calgary.
Now, you mentioned Celine Dion from Quebec, and she represented, I think it was Switzerland in the 1980s and won. How much enthusiasm is there in Quebec, given, I guess, its linguistic and cultural ties to Europe, particularly France?
It'll be interesting to see. I haven't heard a lot of specific comments out of Quebec just yet. I mean, the news is relatively fresh for Canadians today. Canada Day is also not as big a deal in Quebec. Their Fête Nationale is later in June. It was a few days ago. Quebec's culture is very much based in the French language. It is very artistic. All of the Eurovision competitors that have been from Canada, and I hope I'm correct in saying this, certainly the ones who have made it to the semifinals and the finals have been francophones. But Quebec's linguistic and musical style is very different from France's, from Switzerland, from Belgium, from the francophone communities in Europe. They've got their own twist on things. They've got their own accents, their own musical styles. So I do think that you're going to see something that feels quite different from France French, so to speak, coming out of Quebec, but it is a powerhouse when it comes to Canadian cultural product. Many of our exports, so to speak, when it comes to music are from Quebec. So it wouldn't surprise me if our finalist ends up being a Quebecer or a Francophone.
Interesting. Now, Anis, despite what Eurovision says, it is a political contest. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has been pushing Canada's participation. Why does he want Canada to be part of this cultural spectacle in Europe?
I mean, many will use the word trade war when it comes to how Canada is dealing with the United States right now. I don't know that that would be the term we always want to use. But this announcement about Eurovision is actually coming on the same day that we are talking about whether the free trade deal between Canada, Mexico, and the United States will be renewed or not. Now, the deal is continuing on paper for now, but it's up in the air. Does what we call CUSMA here in Canada, does it keep going? Does it end eventually? So there is maybe a cultural aspect to what the Prime Minister is talking about here when he highlights that we are joining in the Eurovision Song Contest. It is unusual for a Canadian Prime Minister to speak publicly and to make announcements about the CBC and Radio-Canada, the public broadcasters. We usually have an arm's length relationship. We do have an arm's length relationship, but there's clearly some political tactics here in the Prime Minister trying to highlight connections between Canada and other economic powerhouses in the world, even if he's using culture to do that. And the European Union would be one of those powerhouses.
Now, several countries have boycotted Eurovision because of Israel's participation. Now, the war in Gaza has sharply divided host broadcasters and participants in the past couple of years. Why would Canada want to get caught up in all of that right now?
It hasn't been as big a topic of discussion here. Not to say Israel and Gaza hasn't been a topic of discussion, but Eurovision's connection with it. And that's partly because Eurovision itself hasn't been, I would say, a mainstream discussion point until recently when it was introduced by both the CBC and by the federal government as a potential entry point. It is likely to become at least something that is talked about in some circles. Some of the former competitors in Eurovision who have been from Canada and competed for other countries have spoken up, in particular over the last couple of years, about Israel's participation. So Canadians haven't been silent on this. I don't expect that they would continue to be. It hasn't hit a mainstream point yet. It may as we get closer to a final. It's certainly not something that has been absent from our discussion points. You know, here at the CBC, we've had stories talking with Canadians about their feelings as Eurovision fans or as Eurovision voters over Israel's participation. So it's something that has been discussed, but it hasn't hit a political boiling point or even a simmering point here when it comes to Eurovision. That may change. Of course, who knows what happens with geopolitics in that way, but it's certainly not going to be off the table, I would guess.
Now, Anis, a lot of people ask this every year. So just explain to us how and why countries like Canada, like Australia, which joined Eurovision in 2015, or Israel for that matter, why are they allowed to be in Eurovision at all?
Well, I can explain a little bit of that from the CBC's perspective. We have been what's called an associate member of the European Broadcasting Union for many, many years, dating back into the mid 20th century. So we have already created partnerships with European broadcasters to exchange news footage, to share technical resources with each other. So it is possible, I guess, technologically and relationship-wise for us to interconnect. And then it's just such a globally popular spectacle. You know, Canadians were, I think, either the third most popular country to vote in the rest of the world category last year, or I suppose this year in Eurovision. So Canadians have always wanted to participate. So it's allowed. We've had those connective tissues with the EBU. And then just a few weeks ago, Canada became a full member of the European Broadcasting Union. It was allowed under the association's rules. They voted to bring in CBC and Radio-Canada. And now that we are fully in the club, because we, and I'm paraphrasing here, we basically say that we adhere to the principles of European broadcasting and public service broadcasting. Now we can join in the contest if we would like. And as our leadership at CBC has said this morning, that is what we're doing. I should also add the Canadian Media Guild, even the union here, which I'm a member of, we had voted in favor of asking the CBC to join Eurovision. So certainly within broadcasting circles in Canada, it's been something talked about for the last year or so.
And all the best to Canada next year in Bulgaria, I think it is. Anis Heydari, senior reporter at CBC News in Calgary. Thanks so much for that.
You're very welcome.
So, is Canada looking for new friends at a difficult moment in its relationship with Washington? Dr. Hamish Telford can speak to me about that. He's Associate Professor of Political Science at the University of the Fraser Valley in Abbotsford, British Columbia. Hamish, it's great to have you. And before we get to that, Eurovision is one of the world's most watched non-sporting events, and some argue it's a huge European cultural soft power asset that Canada now wants in on. What does being in Eurovision offer Canada?
Well, I think it offers us a great entertainment value, first of all. I think really this is a broadcast decision on behalf of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation that is looking for new viewers. They've recently lost the rights to present ice hockey, and they want to attract a younger audience. And so they view this as a great opportunity to accomplish both of those things. I think more broadly, it's being looked upon as trying to forge closer ties between Canada and Europe.
Yeah, okay, we'll talk a little bit more about that first. Let's listen, though, to Mark Carney. He had been pushing for Canada to be part of Eurovision. Let's hear a soundbite from him and we'll come back to you.
Canada, breaking news, going to participate in Eurovision.
Breaking news. That was going to be my breaking news. I'm going to have to find another announcement. Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, look, we're the third largest exporter of music in the world. Canada is, after the United States and the UK. The world wants Canada, wants Canadian culture, and this is another way just to spread the message, spread the love, and a bit of unity.
Hamish Telford, clearly Mark Carney is a big Eurovision fan, but he's also a vocal critic of Donald Trump. And recently he said in Ireland, the new world order will be built starting with Europe. I'm just wondering what you think this signal, what this is sending to the US, given, I guess, the hostility coming in recent years from Donald Trump's White House.
Absolutely. You know, Canada, ever since Donald Trump took the presidency again for the second time, Canada has been desperately looking for new friends. Canada has been greatly harmed by tariffs, as have other countries, even though we have a free trade agreement with the United States, a free trade agreement that Donald Trump made us renegotiate the last time he was president. Although just today he has announced that he doesn't want to renew the agreement for the next 16 years. He wants to engage in annual reviews. So Canada is looking to diversify its trade. 75% of our trade does go to the United States. And we're looking for other markets, both in Asia, but also in Europe. Of course, Mark Carney worked in Europe as the governor of the Bank of England, has a lot of connections in Europe, and is very much, I think, a Europhile. And we saw how much he loves Eurovision there. And so this is a natural sort of partnership for Canada.
Yeah, aside from this big cultural crossover that is Canada being in Eurovision, the government in Canada has been also seeking closer defence energy and, as you outlined, trade ties with Europe. Could you spell out some of those other attempts to build closer relationships with Europe?
Absolutely. Well, one of the big things that we're waiting on, and we were supposed to know by today, in fact, was Canada's decision on buying a new fleet of submarines. There was a bid from South Korea, as well as a bid from a consortium of Germany and Norway. And the government was supposed to make its announcement by the end of June, and we've not yet heard. Obviously, if we go with the European bid, that will forge much stronger defense ties between Canada and Europe. And it's not just the acquisition of the submarines, but are actively engaged in security in the North Atlantic and especially in the Arctic.
Now, I guess some people would argue joining Eurovision wouldn't have much of an impact at all on these kinds of relationship building exercises when it comes to do with defence and energy and trade ties. So what's the symbolism of this?
The symbolism is that we're becoming better friends. And I think it's all part of a package. Again, since Donald Trump became president a year and a half ago, Canadians have really soured on the United States. We see that in the travel data. Travel from Canada to the United States has plummeted. The airlines have had to pull back flights because people just aren't going. And Canadians are looking for new destinations for travel. And one of those places is Europe. And I think Eurovision will help continue that trend of Canadians looking to Europe for holidays and other cultural ties.
Now, Hamish, there was even speculation fairly recently that Canada could become an EU member one day. And last year, we'll look at this poll, Canadians were asked whether they would support or oppose joining the EU, and we can bring that poll up now. 42% said they would support Canada joining the EU, 33% said they would oppose, and 26% said they were not sure. This is a poll, according to YouGov, taken in April 2025. Hamish, aside from the fact that EU membership is limited to European states, so Canada couldn't join at the moment even if it wanted to, what does it tell you that potentially more than 40% of Canadians would actually support this idea?
Well, I think it tells us two things. First of all, it tells us that Canadians view Europe very favorably. And secondly, right now at least, we're viewing the United States very unfavorably. The United States has been our traditional ally and trade partner for a long time. Geography sort of dictates that. But given this presidency and this administration, as we said at the outset, Canada is desperately looking for new friends. And I think Europe is the obvious tie for us, and Canadians view Europe very positively.
Yeah. Hamish, let's end on the bigger picture now. What does this moment in Canada's history tell us about its national identity and how it sees its place in the world?
Canadian national identity has often been defined negatively. That is, we are not Americans. And that, of course, has been emphasized over the past year and a half. We are very much not Americans. We do not buy into the MAGA project that Donald Trump has launched there. And I think we view ourselves in many ways in sort of European terms. We're binational, we're French and English speaking country with a great deal of ethnic diversity through immigration. We're a multicultural society, as is most of Europe now. And of course, we have the historical ties to Britain and France. And I think we're looking to build on those ties to other parts of Europe.
Dr. Hamish Telford from the University of the Fraser Valley in British Columbia, thank you so much for your insights today.
You're most welcome.
So we'd love to hear from you. What do you think of Canada joining Eurovision? Is it a cultural move or a calculated political signal? And will you be watching the contest next year? Let us know in the comments. And if you haven't already, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm Jared Reid in Berlin. Take care.